Welcome back. My name is Chris Matthews. I'm your relationship coach and licensed marriage and family therapist. And in this video, I'm going to share 3 common exchanges couples have. Those exchanges are fights, arguments, and persuasive conversations. The first one that is very common for a lot of clients to come into therapy with are fights. And I'll get a call from a couple and they'll say, hey, Chris, we need to come in because we've been doing a lot of fighting. And I want to take a moment and define what fights are. So fights usually are designed to produce a winner and a loser. And they tend to evoke pain or hurt. That's why a lot of couples will engage in a fight and then they'll retreat because things are said or done that were designed to harm the other partner. Fights lack cognition. I'll hear couples tell me a lot of times, man, I just lost it. Or I went from 0 to 10 with the snap of fingers, right? So in that moment, there isn't really any control. And fights also tend to be triggered by underlying emotions and feelings that weren't properly processed. And just for clarity, if you find yourself in a fight with your partner, it's so critical for one person to learn how to pause and take space. And taking space is one of the best things you can do to prevent a fight. And that looks like the process of first acknowledging what you're experiencing. If you find that your heart rate is increasing or you're having ruminated thoughts and you find yourself about to yell or scream, being able to tell your partner, hold up, slow down, I'm about to get here and I don't want to do that because it usually doesn't turn out right. Telling your partner where you're going to go and how long you're going to go, therefore. So that could look like, hey, let me step outside, take a walk, let me just fall back for a second. That might look like going into the man cave or going into another environment where your partner's not present. Where couples get into trouble is they'll just abruptly leave. They don't describe where they're going and how long they'll be there. So that might look like, with my wife, if I'm getting upset, I say, hey, baby, I'm starting to get, upset. And if I keep going with you, I'm going to end up saying something I don't want to say to hurt you. I'm going to go outside real quick, play with the kids, just kind of get my mind off of it. And then in about 30 minutes, let's come back. And when I take that space, I'm telling her what I'm experiencing. I'm telling her where I'm going and how long I'm going to be there. And then I come back. At that point, it's my job and responsibility to keep my word and come back. When I come back, I've come down enough to where we can engage in a proper conversation. So that's how you can avoid a fight and make sure you're not abandoning your partner. The next common engagement couples have are arguments. So what makes arguments different than fights? Well, arguments can be healthy expressions, right? Think about like a debate. Usually an argument is the intersection of 2 different opinions. I think about how couples may desire different things and they're looking to come together to have a unified vision. Arguments are based on data that can be factual or interpreted as true. So when you're arguing with your partner, you're making points. So for example, if my wife and I are arguing about a purchase, my biggest thing is the utilization of whatever you're buying. So if you want to buy this fancy exercise equipment and only use it one time a year, then my point or what I'm bringing to the argument is, tell me more about how you're going to use this. And if she says, I'm going to use it every day, and I know that she has a tendency to sleep in or not be consistent, then I'm going to feel like it's just a waste of money. Well, her point in the argument might be, why are you not supporting me? I just want to be healthy. So we have 2 different opinions that are at an intersection that are producing conflict. That's the example of an argument versus just fighting and there's just emotion and there's no logic or rationale being discussed. Another component to an argument is that they do have emotion, but they can sustain respect. So I might heighten my voice tone or she might express somewhat of an attitude, but we're not name calling. We're not trying to hurt the other person. We still may have some excitement because our goal is to get our points across, but we're not trying to hurt each other. And that's the real big difference between a fight and an argument. So arguments can transition into fights because it goes from the intersection of ideas to now I'm trying to hurt you. And last but not least, arguments can sometimes lack resolution, meaning it's a to be continued. So now that I've talked about arguments and fights, what's the preferred alternative? Well, I like to think of persuasive conversations as a replacement for fights and arguments. And I'm going to tell you why. Persuasive conversations are more like a sales pitch. They can involve well thought out questions and answers. So there might be some preparation before having that dialogue. So if I use the example again of my wife wanting to purchase equipment, she may have already said to herself, okay, what are going to be some of his rebuttals? One might be price. So she's going to identify how to sell me on the price. So that would look like value. The next thing she might look at is, my husband may say, we already have equipment. So she's now going to sell me on why that equipment is going to help her better achieve her health goals. So she's already been prepared before we go into the dialogue to counteract the points that I might make. So in order to do that, she has to then first take away the emotion. She has to look at the facts in terms of how I'm thinking about the money and the utilization. Another piece with persuasive conversations, they tend to avoid triggers. In other words, if I'm having a persuasive conversation with my wife, I'm not going to say something that could be painful. For example, well, you never do something. You never work out, so why is this going to be different? At that point, I'm now attacking her character. And then, everything hits the fan, and now we're arguing. And then we're having a fight. So persuasive conversations, if you're not careful, they can segue into fights and arguments as well. What keeps a persuasive conversation a safe space is that there's not a rush. We can stop the dialogue, pause, and then come back later. Usually in fights and arguments, they become heightened and escalated because each person is on a clock, an imaginary clock to get their point out. And then instead, there's not any listening. At that point, all you're doing is just trying to make sure you're heard, but you're not receiving what your partner's saying. So it's almost like a traffic jam. Think about if you have a one-way street and there's somebody that turns down the one-way street. You're now stuck. One person's either going to both people are going to have to back out and go separate ways, or one person is going to have to back out and turn around. So you might be in the middle of a persuasive conversation and feel an argument brewing. Pause, slow down, and just become the listener. When you become the listener, you then prevent the emotions from being heightened because your partner can talk in a soft, calm voice because they know they're not competing to be heard. So that could look like just paraphrasing what your partner is saying. So, for example, if my wife is talking about equipment, I'll say, so what I'm hearing you say, babe, is that this equipment works a different muscle group and it's easier, and you feel like if we get this equipment, you'll use it more because it's easier to use and it's going to target that particular muscle group. Did I get it right? So at that point, she's now willing to know, okay, he's listened to me, so I'm going to give him that respect to listen to him. And that can keep the persuasive conversation from going off the tracks and becoming an argument or a fight. Now, there are 3 T's that you can apply to ensure that you're having persuasive conversations and not arguments and fights. The first T is going to be tone. So what is tone, right? Think of tone as the emotional energy produced from the dialogue. That emotional energy can be verbal or nonverbal. If your partner comes in and they're distracted or they're sucking their teeth or rolling their eyes, they're already communicating a negative tone. So at that point, you may not be in the right position to even have the dialogue. Tone can also be pertaining to other body language, like if I sit in my chair and I'm open, right, laid back and I'm open, I'm now inviting the dialogue. I'm now in a position where you can see I'm comfortable, I'm willing to engage. If your partner has their arms crossed and they're deep in thought or frustrated or upset, they're now producing a tone that's like, that might not be the right moment to speak. Tone can be verbal based on volume. Volume is a really big component of tone. A lot of couples will come in and they'll engage in an argument. It's almost like a wildfire. It sparks out of nowhere because the voice tone or the volume will increase and then immediately the other partner's on defense. And tone is very tricky because I speak loud because I'm passionate and I'm excited. So my wife, when we first started dating, she would take my excitement as I'm yelling at her. And I realized that in order for her to properly receive the message, I had to be more mindful of my volume. My volume directly impacts my tone. As I speak with you guys right now, I'm slowing my volume down and I'm speaking softer. When you speak softer, it makes the person have to listen a little bit harder in order to hear what I'm saying. So when you're with your partner, having a level of control over what you're saying and how you're saying it. I use pauses. I use my tone, my volume to control my tone. And that now better allows my partner to receive the message. Next, tone has to be coupled with good timing. Your partner is their own individual person, meaning they're having their own thoughts and experiences prior to you coming to engaging with them. Certain times are better to talk to certain people. I know in my marriage, late at night is not a good time to talk to my wife. She's been beat up by the day already. Work, school, kids. She's not going to be in the right place to have a good dialogue with me. A lot of men come into counsel and they tell me, they'll ask this question, they'll say, Chris, why does my wife want to have the most serious conversation as soon as my feet hit the door? And a lot of the women will say, well, I hadn't seen you all day. When else am I supposed to talk to you? Allowing there to be rules and regulations when it comes to timing. Being able to speak up and say to your partner, hey, when I come in, the first thing I want to do is greet you. Then I want to go and decompress. Then after X amount of time, I would be more than willing to engage with you, unless the game's on, right? So making sure you have timing coupled with tone. And then last but not least, make sure you're looking at the topic. There's certain topics that a person may not be ready to talk about at a certain time. For example, when my wife was experiencing the loss of a family member, I knew not to talk about change in that moment, whether it be change of routines or habits, because in that moment of loss, she's already trying to put her puzzle pieces of life back together. And to do something as simple as changing the routine could throw her off. So that topic of change wasn't the right time, despite whatever tone I used. So really understanding your partner, because at the end of the day, when you don't understand what they're experiencing, and then you bring a topic in that could be triggering, it doesn't matter how you say it or when you say it, you're not going to get the response you want. So to recap this video, you have fights, which usually are designed to produce a winner or loser or to evoke pain. You have arguments, which can be healthy, but they tend to not usually have a resolution because of the emotion involved. And then you have the persuasive conversation, which is more like a sales pitch. I go over these more in my book. I also will produce more videos because communication is really just the ability to transmit messages back and forth with your partner. And a lot of times, the nonverbals send just as much, if not greater messages than the verbal messages. So make sure that when you have dialogue, you're mindful of tone, which can also be aligned with the volume and pitch. Also, identify the right time. Is my partner going to be present to hear what I have to say? And last but not least, are they in the right space for me to present the topic? Another example why I'm thinking about topic, money. Men tend to have emotional arousal to money. So if you're trying to, talk to your partner about a large purchase and it's bill time, the first of the month or the 15th of the month, that's not the right time to talk about that topic. So ensuring you're aware of what your partner's encountering overall is going to help with this as well. My goal was to produce a video that can help you guys understand how to have verbal and nonverbal exchanges with your partner. And if you want more of these tools, you can visit our website, relationshipcounselingtools.com. This is Chris Matthews, your relationship coach and licensed marriage and family therapist, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side.
Oh, you can never go back. I gotta take it on the other side.